The wagon creaked and rumbled as its wheels rolled over the dirt path, occasionally snapping a loose twig as it went. In the past hour of walking, 2 packs of ghouls spotted them along the road. Each group had only 3 or 4 of the monsters, and Ernest's crossbow and Blick's spears dealt with them quickly. Ben walked with a spear slung over his shoulder, one hand gently resting next to where Red sat on the wagon. He glanced at the child from time to time to make sure she was all right. Red sat motionless on the wagon, only teetering when the wagon rolled over uneven terrain. Ben looked over his shoulder behind the wagon where Avery and Marge walked. The littlest goats sat on the supplies in the wagon, and the older ones stayed close to their mother. The 2 talked quietly among themselves, but their words didn't carry over the sound of the wheels. The royal guardsman walked right behind him. Umpty moved silently, his gaze fixated on the brush and trees at the side of the road. Initially, Ben figured he was on the lookout for any ghouls that may be hiding in the woods. The bandages covering one side of his pale head didn't make it easy to track his gaze. The edge of the woods didn't look like it held any threats. Ben scanned the ferns and brambles, but all stayed still and quiet. He glanced back once more. As sunlight glinted across his face through the canopy, Ben got a better look at Umpty's one good eye. It didn't seem to scan or lock onto anything, like he wasn't actually looking at anything at all. Spooked by the lack of movement, Ben turned his head forward again and frowned. He glanced at the back of Ernest's head as he pulled the cart. Ernest had expressed suspicion of Umpty before they left his cabin to walk this road. Seeing the cold stillness in Umpty's eye, Ben couldn't help but wonder, was there something going on with this guardsman? Maybe there was a reason for the suspicion, but for what, he didn't really know. The distant sound of growling reached Ben's sensitive wolf ears. "Hey, there's more up ahead. I can hear them coming this way." Marge rushed forward with spears in both of her large hands. The grouchy dwarf Blick rushed around the other side of the cart and joined her up front, holding his dwarven hammer at the ready. Rounding a curve in the road, they saw a large ghoul running around wildly on the road, bent over as if it were trying to catch a mouse. Ernest dropped the wagon handles and pulled out his crossbow. Ben readied his spear. The goat children whimpered, but their mother quieted them quickly. Avery beckoned Red over, and all the little ones hid behind the bundles in the wagon. A spear flew past Ben's head and struck the ghoul in the side of its cranium. As the beast fell, Umpty strolled by to retrieve the weapon without saying a word. "What the hell, Umpty?" Ben reprimanded him. "With all of us in front of you? You could have hit someone." Ben's ears leaned back as he bared his teeth. "No, I couldn't," Umpty stated as he wiped the spear off on the grass. A royal guardsman is required to have pinpoint accuracy with any weapon they use. "My aim is flawless." His cold voice echoed with a sense of pride. A small dark blur darted from the underbrush and jumped on the fallen ghoul. Instead of some kind of animal, a strangely designed hat perched on the monster's body. The group around the wagon stood in shock, their mouths open and eyes wide. The hat was old, and its top surface was peeling away. Patches of mismatched cloth covered the tattered garment in places, and a faded ace of hearts was tucked into the dirty band. The hat shuffled around on the ghoul's body, as if a small creature had been caught under it. As suddenly as it arrived, the hat jumped back to the road and paused. It quivered there for a second before taking off at breakneck speed in another direction. The strange event left everyone frozen in confused silence. Only Ernest looked different. He shook his head slightly, and a strange, crooked smile appeared on his face. Eventually, Ben spoke up. "What just happened?" The sound of his voice brought everyone back to the present, but no one answered. Umpty shrugged, looking at everyone with a wide eye, clearly just as confused as the rest of them. "Truly odd. I wonder what he's up to now," Ernest said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. Ben stepped closer to Ernest. "Do you know about that thing?" he asked the tall man. Ernest turned to face him, his smile growing. He wore the face of a man reminiscing about a pleasant time in the distant past. "Well, Ernest, Blick grunted. We be expecting an answer here. Ernest paused to look back in the direction where the hat had gone. That hat belongs to an old friend of mine, an enthusiastic entrepreneur of fancy and ridiculous hats. He waved his hand with a flourish to emphasize his old friend's sense of fanciness. That looked like the one he always wore. I wonder why it's not on his head right now. Do you two still talk with each other? Ben asked. Not really. His admiration of hats kinda got to his head. Ernest shrugged. In fact, one might say that his hats replaced what was supposed to be in his head, rather than on it. He waved his hand around his own head, making that gesture that said his friend had a taste of insanity added to his mental recipe. Everyone exchanged glances. Do you know what he's up to now? Marge asked. Why would his hat be here now? And why does it move on its own? Ernest shrugged. No idea. I haven't heard from him since he went back to his homeland a few years ago. He peered into the woods again. I knew some of his hats had strange quirks, but I'd never heard of one moving on its own. He cupped one hand around his mouth. Madigan Chapeau, are you here? No one answered his call, and his crooked shoulders slumped. I guess it's just his hat. He took the cart's handlebars again and got ready to walk. Anyway, we can't linger. We should keep moving. Never know what we'll face ahead. Everyone agreed and returned to their places around the cart. Ben wondered if they'd see that odd hat again, or maybe its owner, or whatever was inside of it. On the fallen ghoul's belt sat a small sheath likely for some kind of knife. Ben raised a brow. The sheath was empty, and small, precise cuts had severed the strap that would hold one in. They almost looked like tiny teeth marks. Had the hat, or something hiding inside the hat, taken it?